Strawberry Station.
So this is a video about my personal experiences and journey to this point, and while it might sound silly, it explains why a deceptively simple internet genre of music led me out of a pretty dark time in my life. So I'm at a total crossroads right now, and as I speak to you I'm about to embark on a huge adventure to another continent. In January 2020 I'm moving out to Canada, where I'm hoping to make new friends and experience the thrill of a clean slate in a new country. And silly as it sounds, that's thanks to Future Funk. I'm Strawberry Station, and this is why Future Funk changed my life. Now, for those of you who don't know me or stumbled across this video in a random YouTube binge, I'm a bedroom music producer of middling to average ability, and that's probably being nice to myself. Across a few genres, but mostly Future Funk. I'm not going to get too deep into the explanation of what Future Funk is, because a few other people have covered it before. I'd recommend you check out Pad Chennington's video if you want a quick crash course in what it actually is. But in a sentence, it's a sample-heavy dance music genre that takes heavy influence from French house and disco, retro aesthetics, Japanese music and imagery. And yeah, it changed my life. So cast your mind back to 2016. Ignore the politics please, Leicester City won the league, so on balance it was still a pretty good year. I was coming off the back of a year in the teaching profession, which had always been my career goal coming out of university. I wasn't that happy with how things had gone, and I decided on a change of scenery. So I took up work with a local company in the hopes of higher pay, job security and the ability to save for that elusive mortgage that would allow me to move out and live with my then girlfriend. You know, get the job, save the cash, get the house, start a family, live happily ever after. The boomer dream, if you like, and it was all within sight. Only, like a fool, I didn't see the warning signs, and within a month of starting on my new post, my girlfriend and I had broken up. The new job instantly lost its shine and became a daily toil, and my fragile mental health was, well, shot to pieces, to be honest. I'd already had past struggles with anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and all that became amplified after that. My self-confidence was shattered, and with my social life in tatters as my university days disappeared over the horizon, I was trapped in a daily slog with no end in sight. It sucked. So I'd been clawing around in the first year or so looking for a new girlfriend to fill that void in my soul, but with zero luck. I had a string of abortive first dates on Tinder, which did nothing to suggest that I was the sort of person anyone would want to be with. After all, a guy in his mid-20s working 9 to 5 and living at home isn't exactly an attractive prospect in this day and age. But, you know, I was dead set on that mortgage. I was blindly saving, living on a pittance, you know, £pounds a day if that. I had no social life despite the salary that I was drawing. My life was pretty shit, and I was well on my way to being that guy, the one who's still single and living at home in his mid-30s with no real prospects. However, around this time, my friend was in his final year of university, and by chance I managed to start hanging around with his friends in the city. They were living in some pretty, let's say, playful accommodation at the time, and I spent most of my time with them in a terraced house which became known as the Black Hole, for reasons I could only speculate on, but which I assume had something to do with the curtains being drawn 24/7 and the place being very hard to leave once you arrived in it. It was cheap, it was chilled, and it was good company, so I liked it. There was always something playing on the TV, and we'd sit around playing games and chilling with YouTube playlists in the background. A whole host of sweet music entered my conscience over the course of that year or two, whether that was Thundercat, The Midnight, or Vaporwave classics like Macintosh Plus and Echo Jams. I mean, I'd always made music, if not at all well, and during this time I began to fool around on FL Studio during those dead evenings at home, just trying to create some rudimentary Vaporwave of my own. It was pretty bad. It's there on Bandcamp if you want to see it, but it means something to me. It gave me some distraction from my existential angst that I had at the time, so yeah, it's still pretty special to me. The paradigm shift for me came sometime in early 2017 when a video came on screen one day while we sat on that same sofa. You know the one, you get the bass drop, the shimmering reverb-drenched guitar licks, the power of the drums. I mean, it's clearly born from Vaporwave, but it somehow had an energy and a positive outlook that was completely different to anything I'd heard up to that point. You know, the girl looks to her side, I see a can of Pepsi, and my attention was nowhere else. And that was David Dean Burkhart's video for Cherry Pepsi. which was my first taste of St. Pepsi and with it the hit Vibes album. So yeah, from that day, future funk was on my radar for the first time. And it awoke something inside me, this kind of weird feeling you might know yourself, when the imagery and the sound give you a strange, positive emotion of nostalgia and almost longing, an ability to transport you to a world you find familiar, but which you never really personally knew. What those in the vaporwave scene would probably describe as aesthetics. My god, this was my aesthetic. I had to know more. So I went straight home and put Hit Vibes on, and it didn't take long after that day for me to start delving into the wider future funk scene. So this was about 2017, the peak of artsy music, and I didn't have to look too far to see there was a rich theme of artists around the world, and they were making something from the imagery and the sounds of the past with this positive forward outlook. It was clearly something quite different to vaporwave, a genre in its own right, and in my own little world, it was a pool party in a city on a future shore, surrounded by anime babes and tape decks, while the sounds of someone like Macross 8299, Desired, Conscious Thoughts or Night Tempo filled the air. It was a true escape from me at a time when my life was a total monochrome drag. And after hovering around on Reddit for long enough, I realised that I wanted to join those people and I had the tools to do so. Maybe if I made some future funk of my own, I'd be able to join this gang of people, sharing their online community and their love for the feeling this music gave us all. So I stopped playing around with vaporwave and decided to give it a go. Needless to say, early results were pretty poor. My first track was roundly slated on Reddit, and in hindsight was very deservedly so. I was that guy that posted the "Hey, here's my first future funk song, what do you think?" and wondering why my poorly quantised muddy mess of a flip of Night to Remember by Shalimar wasn't the next big hit being lined up for artsy. So yeah, there were plenty of missteps in those early days, and I guess I developed something of a reputation on Reddit for being a poor artist, someone with little understanding of how production worked in the genre. Hell, it wasn't even until midway through my first album, last summer, that I even learnt how to apply sidechain. I was just throwing shit at the wall and hoping some would stick at this point. I guess I wasn't really a part of any community of artists at this point either. I was more of a satellite just hovering on the fringes, slowly but surely picking up a rudimentary toolkit to make better music myself within the genre. I mean, I had the passion for the music, and in a sea of criticism that was admittedly tough to take, I would get the occasional nice comment from someone who had taken a download code or heard me on SoundCloud, and that was huge to me. At that point in my life, even as a nobody making what in hindsight was terrible music, I was making some people happy, and that made me want to get better and get the approval of some of those naysayers around me. And yeah, this is where things started to escalate, and I'll hold my hand up right now and say I've had a couple of huge lucky breaks along the way. I mean, I often mention what a crazy whirlwind the past year or so has been, and that's not far from the truth. Things only really started to take off for me after finally getting a sliver of constructive criticism rather than outright dismissal on an early track, probably about in the summer of 2018, and they pointed me in the direction of ED, Electric Dreams' future funk tutorials, and specifically his drum mixing video. Yeah, Electric Dreams is a great producer, really good, who along the lines of the folks like Rhodeszu, has given a lot back to the scene in form of some serious tutorials, and they explain the basics of production in the genre. That one video in particular was a turning point for me. Suddenly the simple act of making a sample sit with my drums was achievable, and after months spent making 2 albums worth of objectively awful crap, I was getting somewhere. So Strawberry Milkshake was the first one of those songs I released, and while it's a pretty simple flip, the song still puts a smile on my face today, purely because of the change in my fortunes it represented. Thanks to ED's tutorial, I now understood some of the key cornerstones of the genre, even just getting the sample to hit on the beat, how to sidechain properly, and choosing the right one-shots to lay your drums and make your own beats to take on the source material with. While I know for a fact I have a long way to go in terms of my own production quality, I've been told recently by a few people that my drums are a strong point, and I can trace it all back to ED's video, so thank you dude, you set me on my way to sucking marginally less. So the releases that I put out around this time coincided with me finally getting to know some people in the scene through Discord. In those early days it was folks like Mare, Mr. Wax, or even some of the folks at Topaz Club, and they became friends, and it began to dawn on me that there was a lot missing from my songs, and it was going to be a long learning process to get to the level of those around me, and it's one that continues to this day, despite the progress that I've made. I dropped my album Strawberry Dreams in September to relatively little fanfare. I'd grown to expect it at that point, and I must be honest, at that point I was growing a little bit weary of my lack of progress, but this is where the big break came. So, around the time that I released the album, I'd begun to get into collecting cassettes from other future funk artists. My first future funk cassette was Sailor Wave 2 from Macross 82.99, and shortly afterwards I was lucky enough to win some copies of Dan Dan's albums in these gorgeous limited edition gift boxes that had posters and other goodies inside them. I was so in love with the concept of just making something tangible that you could hold in your hand, and this led me to try my hand, primarily for fun, at making my own homebrew cassette for Strawberry Dreams. So I ordered the shells, printed the J-cards and labels, and before I knew it I held my album in my own hand. And it looked really cool. I was really proud of it, and I wanted to show the world, even though I had no intention of making more than a handful to actually sell on to people. I didn't think there was any interest. I dropped it on my then new Twitter account at the time, not really expecting much, but the response was not what I expected at all. Suddenly people were asking me and DMing me to ask me when it was coming out and where they could get a copy. While I had to let them down lightly by letting them know it was just a homebrew project, it did generate a small but nonetheless welcome amount of interest in my new album. And that made me feel really good about myself. It was like the first time since that fateful day back in 2016 that I felt like I had something to offer the world. That even if just 2 or 3 people heard my music and it made them smile or gave them the same feeling of escape that I got from this music, I was doing something worthwhile. Even as just a small fish in a very big pond, it just felt really nice and just made me feel wanted, almost. And then, I got a message out of the blue from Alan, who's the owner of Core Respect Records. At the time, his label was fast building a reputation for dropping some of the most amazing future funk in the scene, stuff like Remember by EVEXI, Heartbreak by Suey Uzi, and of course a deluxe version of 810 by Fiverr. And he wanted to know if I'd found anybody else to release Strawberry Dreams with. What, me? I thought he was kidding at first, but he'd seen my homebrew tape on Twitter and he wanted to help after hearing my album. I was taken aback. Was this guy for real? Did he really want me, just some random guy that just started out on the same bill as these ridiculously good artists, folks that I looked up to who got me into the scene in the first place? And he was legit, and while he knew I was raw, he saw potential. We made the kind of negotiation and we agreed on 75 copies. I had originally planned to make 10, so that was a step up in itself. And shortly after dropping an EP of Christmas music, the release dropped in mid-December 2018, and they all sold out in 2 days. I was shocked. Overnight, I went from being this wallflower in future funk to an actual part of the scene, and I had Alan to thank for that, and I'm hugely grateful for him to this day, because in hindsight that was a crossroads for me in the genre, at a time when I could have given up. Side point on the wider scene, in those last months of 2018 I'd got to know people in various scenes loosely overlapping with future funk, primarily some amazing artists through Het Zilver, who was a YouTuber and artist promoter. He was kind enough to put me in touch with Sophie, known as Heskets, a Canadian artist for who he gifted me out of the blue a commission for the Christmas present EP. And I was in love with the artwork, it was so good. I was honestly really taken aback that somebody would do that for me. And me and Heskets became good friends, and ever since she's been my go-to artist for my album art. And that was all because of one guy's act of random generosity. So thank you Het, and thank you Sophie for being partners on my journey so far. Long may it continue. But in those months after Strawberry Dreams gained traction, I started to truly come out of my shell and become comfortable in the scene. Though I was, and still do remain, in awe of the amazing producers I was making friends with, the likes of Mare, Jelly Bomb Bomb, Melonade, Mocha Yume and others, without even realising I was becoming more self-confident, and these online friends around the world were making me want to get out and see what more I could. And I did that, and more. By February of this year, I had a visa to work in Canada. A huge change in my life, a total upheaval, and it was all thanks to the positive energy and self-belief that my growing fan base and connection to this wonderful future funk scene had given me. It gave me the sense of adventure I needed to take that mad step into the unknown. But one thing was missing at this point. While it was wonderful to be involved in the online community, at this point it was just that, online friends. I mean, was this really a movement, or just a bunch of folks like me, sat in bedrooms, fiddling with old funk songs? Well, my answer came from across the Atlantic in my future home country, where a group of artists led by Dine were gearing up for Essential in Toronto, the first big future funk live event on my radar. And while I was tempted to fly out there with my new right to residence, I couldn't justify it while I saved up money for my big move. But I needed that feeling of knowing what it would be like to gather with other like-minded people in the scene and put on a big show. So like most of the turning points in this story, Groove Horizons happened spontaneously and almost by accident. A random post on the Future Funk subreddit asking for a similar night in the UK led to a drunken string of messages around social media. Could we put something like this on? Melonade got on board, and before we knew it, there were 8 artists on board and we were in business, baby. We enlisted the help of Alexander Hall, a night organiser based in London. We got the venue and properly got to know one another. Jelly Bon Bon was the first person from the scene I ever met face to face. It was always going to be a weird moment, but we hit it off straight away, and with his guidance I had my first experience behind the decks under my belt. For a bit of context, this was less than 6 months after my first tentative steps towards making passable future funk. It was surreal. So Jelly, yeah, you're another guy I need to thank for showing me the ropes. I can safely count you and Mr. Wax amongst my best friends in the scene at this point, and I got a lot of appreciation for what you guys do. But anyway, roll on to the weekend of the show, VFD, London, and here I am sharing a bill with my new friends. Some of them are artists who were absolutely killing it when I first started out, people I'd go as far as to call an inspiration for my own journey to this point. You know, I'm on just before Conscious Thoughts, he's followed by EV.EXI, the night's closed by Android Apartment for Christ's sake, and then there's me, this random guy from Leicester, opening the night and getting the party started. Needless to say, I was pretty nervous. Would I sink or swim? Melanie gets on the mic, introduces me to some applause. The room's packed, and I nervously queue up my songs and get going. So the intro song's playing. Yeah, we're doing this. It's complete with the artist introduction that I got off of Fiverr. Here comes the first transition. Remember your training, Strawberry, you gotta make them groove. I've left the second song playing, haven't I? When I'm With You cuts in halfway through. I have to re-cue in complete silence while the crowd mumbles. Needless to say, my face goes the same colour as the fruit that I'm so fond of. But you know what? In that moment, with my one fear for the past 5 months, namely cocking my performance up, a reality, my nerves go out the window. I relax a bit. I look around, the crowd is starting to dance and move and sing along. It's happening. The audience has forgiven my nerves and now I can make them move.
You are now listening to Strawberry Station.
I won't lie, I still get emotional when I look back on that specific moment when halfway through the set the crowd started chanting "Strawberry, Strawberry, Strawberry" when I dropped "Shine Again." There's just something about that one moment, you know, there's a room full of people and they're singing your name. It made me realise I'd found my calling and then what I was doing was more than just some silly phase. Up until that point I'd wondered, was my place in the scene real, or was I still just a footnote looking up to the handful of artists, you know, the Young Bays and the Night Tempos, that were making this a real live scene, with no hope of ever really emulating that sort of feeling with a crowd? Well, that answered me. If I put my mind to it, I could be a real part of this movement, and the fact that this show was now real and unfolding in front of my eyes was the confirmation that I needed. So yeah, I stood back a couple of times that night and I just took it all in. Being the wallflower again, as I mentioned earlier, but out of choice rather than design this time. So we got the projector and it's beaming retro and anime gifs artsy style across the wall. We've got the crowd moving below the neon glow of the lights and the disco ball, with smiles, camaraderie amongst complete strangers, now friends, united by a sound and a feeling, exactly that sound and a feeling that got me going in the first place when I was down. It was exactly what I had pictured during those early days when this music was my escape, the fantasy dance floor with the people you wish you knew. And here I was. I knew them. I was dancing with them. We'd brought live Future Funk to the UK, and in doing so, we'd made the movement truly global. At the time, Kite from Music to Hang Up was staying with me. He was my roommate for the weekend. He'd just flown in from China. He'd seen Mikazuki Big Wave live. He'd go on to see the similar birth of a live movement in the United States, seeing Vaporwave in New York the next month with Electronicon. And a month after that, he flew out to see another group of my friends from the online scene, Crystal Kitsune, Adrian Wave, Kiss Me Nerdy Girl, playing in Japan. We were the next piece in the jigsaw, allowing someone, if they really wanted to feel this music and this movement live in multiple countries across 3 continents. I'm still not a self-confident person, as much as I can appear it. I mean, I'm ultra aware of my own shortcomings, and I'm still guilty of dwelling on them. But I mean, I sit here now and look back on what I've achieved to this point, even in just the last year. I mean, I've got a solid group of friends who are teaching me new things every day, helping me to improve as an artist. My production is improving little by little. I know I'm still some way off some of those amazing people around me I'm lucky enough to now know personally, but I know that if I keep working and trying new things, I'll get there. I've dropped 3 albums, sold hundreds of cassettes and a bunch of mini discs. I've got to thank the guys at My Pet Flamingo who I met at Groove Horizons. I'm going to soon be achieving a lifelong ambition when my latest album, 1 to 8 State, is released on vinyl thanks to those guys. And with my good friends, of course, I helped put on a live show. It brought together the UK and European scene in one place for the first time. Most importantly, I've regained my belief in my own abilities and my sense of meaning. For me, future funk's more than just a throwaway music genre for a select bunch of isolated people in bedrooms around the world. It really does mean more to me. The moment that bass line in Cherry Pepsi first dropped back in that dark room 2 years ago, my path to new friends, experiences, and ultimately a complete change in my life's trajectory was set. And from here I go onwards to my new adventure in Canada, and I'll get to meet many more of those people I look up to in the scene at next year's Essential. Only whereas last year I had my eye on making the show as a visitor, this time I'm going to be rubbing shoulders with them as part of the bill. Oh, look at the lineup. We've got Disco Holic, we've got Mare, Fibre, Pat Jennington, Lucky Talisman, Ducat, Electric Dreams. Am I really going to be on the same programme as these guys? The self-deprecating random guy who didn't even know what a sidechain was 18 months ago. All I know is that I've come through the darkest point in my life, a point where I had no real hope or aims beyond existing day to day. And now I have that feeling of self-worth back, even if it still feels like I've won the lottery to even be mentioned in the same breath as some of those people around me, whose music helped drag me out of that void in the first place. And while I'm not sure where exactly the next few months and years will lead me, I know for sure that I'm doing the right thing and doing it my way. I've stopped trying to chase a feeling or fill a gap in my life. Just having a hobby that gives me all these opportunities and friends is all I could ever ask for. And there'll be plenty more to come with me, I promise. I hope to share with you my adventures in Canada, and of course I'll put on a party for you all at Essential alongside the rest of the gang. I'll keep making new music and working on my sound, and building that arsenal of new tools day by day. I want to keep collaborating too. 1 to 8 State was a pleasure to put together alongside Jelly Bonbon and Seabound. It was hugely validating to have Mare contribute his awesome remix of Mono no Orari. To be working alongside names that got me into this stuff in the first place is truly humbling, so thank you. But at its heart, I'm just so happy to feel part of future funk as a genre. It makes me smile when I see a new artist appear on the subreddit posting their first track, not least because I was there once myself, more recently than I care to admit. So I want to see this music and this scene keep on growing, for everyone out there to know that with the right focus and approach, they can contribute and make something novel and fresh. And personally, I will always aim to give them that nudge in the right direction so they feel welcome and want to keep going. We're a community and new artists are our lifeblood. I wouldn't be sat here right now if I wasn't in that position myself. So I give thanks to every person who got me to this point in which so much has happened to change my life in 18 crazy months. Thank you to Alan for letting me onto Correspect and convincing me to keep doing this when I was feeling down. Thank you to Mare for keeping me sane during those stressful times in the run-up to Groove Horizons and being a friend from those early days. Thank you to Melanated Alexander Hall for your grafting helping to organise the show with me in London. It wouldn't have happened without you two. Thank you to all the other boys that I shared the bill with that night, Android Apartment, Evie.exi, the boys from Tokyo Wanderer, Conscious Thoughts, for making me feel part of a musical family. And of course I wouldn't forget, but a big thank you to Mr. Wax and Jelly Bonbon, who I now count as my closest pals in the scene, for taking me under your wing and letting me jam with you both, most recently at Kawaii Carnival in Manchester. Even away from the music, you two are crazy bastards and I love you both. Thanks to Krylo for helping me build my musical toolkit more than anyone else, you've been great. To Sophie, to Ragebinder, for your help giving me an image of my own. To Gulf Audio, My Pet Flamingo, Lucid Shores for the releases I've been lucky enough to make this year. And more than anyone else, to every single person who's downloaded or listened to my music, made a comment, streamed something, or bought a tape or mini disc. Well, there's a long way to go yet, and a heck of a lot more to come, but for now I can take stock and reflect on what's happened. In a nutshell, a random niche little internet genre has lifted me out of my depression and given me new meaning. It's restored my self-confidence, it's given me new friends, it's pushed me on to do things that I never expected that I would do. And I'm thankful. Future Funk changed my life. I'm Strawberry Station. Stay funky.